I have told this story maybe 4 times in my whole life. Twice to people who didn't believe me. Once to a doctor who wrote something down without looking up. And once, quietly, to the girl herself, years later, when she was old enough to understand what she had walked out of that night. But I'll tell it to you the way it actually happened, not the cleaned-up version, the real one. It started with a sound I still can't describe right. It was late October, the kind of cold that comes early up here in Cedar Hollow, where the mountains lean in close and the river runs black between them. I was driving home from the diner. It was near midnight. My hands were cracked from washing dishes for 9 hours, and my feet were the kind of tired where you stop feeling them. My son Theo was already asleep at my mother-in-law's, my ex's mother, but she'd kept being kind to me after he left. God bless her. And I had the whole quiet road to myself. And then I heard it. Not a scream, not exactly. It was thinner than a scream, higher, like a whistle cut off before it finished. It came from the river side of the road, past the guardrail down where the water goes fast under the old iron bridge. I want to be honest, my first thought was keep driving. I'm not proud of that, but I was 34, alone, exhausted, and I lived in a town where a woman driving at midnight learned not to stop for sounds she couldn't see. My headlights only caught the fog rolling off the water and the reflectors on the guardrail glowing back at me like little eyes. I kept my foot on the gas for maybe 3 more seconds. Then the sound came again. And this time I knew what it was, not with my ears, with something lower down in the middle of me, the place where being a mother lives. It was a child, a small one, out there in the cold, in the dark, alone. I hit the brakes so hard my thermos flew off the seat. Now you have to understand the river road at night. There are no houses on that stretch, no streetlights, just the guardrail, the drop, and the water. When I stepped out of the car, the cold went straight through my coat like the coat wasn't even there. My breath came out white. Somewhere below me the river was moving, and it made that hushing sound, that endless shhh, like the whole world was telling me to be quiet. "Hello," I called. "Nothing." "Is somebody there? Are you okay?" Nothing again, just the water. I stood there feeling like a fool. I even started to think I'd imagined it, that I was so tired I was hearing things. I put my hand on the car door to get back in. And a voice, so small it was barely a voice at all, said, "Don't." I froze. "Don't leave," it said. I have never in my life moved as fast as I moved to that guardrail. I climbed over it and half slid down the bank on my heels, grabbing at frozen grass, my work shoes filling with mud and ice water. My phone flashlight bounced everywhere. And there, at the very bottom, wedged in the crook where a fallen tree met a rock, right at the edge of the black water, there was a little girl. She was so small. That's the thing that hit me first, before the fear, before anything. She was so small, and she was sitting there in nothing but a thin nightgown, soaked to the waist, her bare feet an inch from the current. Her hair was plastered dark against her face. She was shivering so hard I could hear her teeth. But her eyes were completely calm. That's what stopped me. A kid that cold, that alone, that close to a river that could pull her under in a heartbeat. She should have been screaming. She should have been hysterical. Instead, she looked up at me with these steady, dark, almost golden eyes, like she'd been waiting for me, like she'd known I would come. "There you are," she said. Like I was the one who'd been lost. I got down beside her. The water was so close it splashed my knee, and it was cold enough to burn. Hey, sweetheart, I've got you, I'm right here." I reach for her, and here's the second strange thing. I expected her skin to be ice. She'd been out here God knows how long, half in the river, but when my hands closed around her arms, she was warm. Not warm like normal, warm like she had a fever, warm like there was a stove going somewhere inside that little body. I remember pulling back for just a second, confused. Then I decided it didn't matter. Warm was good. Warm meant alive. "Can you stand? Can you put your arms around my neck?" She lifted her arms without a word. I got her up against my chest and she weighed almost nothing, and she pressed her cold, wet face into my neck, and I climbed that bank one hand at a time, digging my fingers into the roots, my whole body shaking with the effort and the cold and the fear of slipping backward into that water with her. Halfway up, my foot went out from under me, and I heard myself make a sound I'd never made before, this low animal growl of no, not her, not into that river, and somehow I held on. We got to the top. I fell over the guardrail with her still clamped to me, and we landed in a heap on the shoulder of the road, in the light of my own headlights, both of us breathing like we'd run 10 miles. For a second I just lay there with her on top of me, staring up at the black sky, and I laughed. This crazy, gasping, half-crying laugh, because we'd made it, because she was alive and I was alive and the water hadn't gotten either of us. She sat up on my chest, and she put one small warm hand on my cheek, very serious, and she said, "You're the one." I didn't know what she meant. I thought she was in shock. I thought she was just a scared little girl saying scared little things. I had no idea. I got her into the car and cranked the heat all the way up and wrapped her in the wool blanket I kept in the back for Theo. She sat in the passenger seat with her feet up on the cushion, tiny and swallowed by the blanket, watching me with those calm gold-brown eyes while the fog cleared off the windshield. "What's your name, honey?" I asked her. She thought about it. Really thought, like it was a hard question. "Ivy," she said finally. "Ivy, that's a beautiful name. I'm Nora." I reached over and tucked the blanket tighter around her. "Ivy, how did you get down there? Where's your mama? Where's your family?" Something moved behind her eyes when I said family. A shadow. Her mouth pressed into a flat line and she looked out the window at the dark trees. "They can't find me here," she said. "Who can't?" She didn't answer. "Ivy, did somebody hurt you? Did somebody leave you out here?" She turned back to me, and for a second the calm cracked, and I saw how young she really was under all that stillness. 5, maybe 6, and she said in the smallest voice, "I ran away so they'd be safe. I'm going to be honest with you." In that moment I thought I understood. I thought, this is an abused kid. This is a kid who ran from something terrible and is protecting somebody, the way abused kids do, taking the danger onto themselves. My heart just about broke in half. I'd seen it before. My own sister ran from a man like that years ago. "Okay," I said, gentle as I could. "Okay, baby, you don't have to talk about it. We're going to go somewhere warm and we're going to get you dry and nobody's going to hurt you tonight. I promise." She studied my face for a long moment. And then, like she'd decided something, she nodded once and leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. By the time I pulled out onto the road, she was asleep. I should have driven straight to the police station. I know that. Any sensible person knows that. But it was midnight, and the nearest station with anyone in it was 40 minutes the wrong way, and she was soaked and shivering and warm-cold in that strange way, and every mother instinct I had was screaming, "Get this child dry, get this child fed, get this child safe first, sort out the rest in the morning." So I took her home. That decision changed everything, every single thing that came after, and I'd make it again. I lived at the end of Willow Bend, in a little rented house with a sagging porch and a wood stove that was more reliable than anything else in my life. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like whatever I'd cooked last, and a yard that ran up into the tree line where the national forest started. In the daytime it was pretty. At night the woods were just a wall of black at the edge of the porch light, and I'd never thought much about them. I'd start thinking about them plenty after that night. I carried Ivy inside. She woke up just enough to stand while I got her out of the wet nightgown and into one of Theo's old t-shirts that hung down to her knees. I ran a bath, warm not hot, and she sat in it silent while I washed the river mud off her feet and out of her hair. That's when I noticed the necklace. She wore it on a leather cord, and it must have been under the collar of her nightgown before because I hadn't seen it in the car. It was a pendant. Metal, old, dark metal, silver maybe, but heavier looking, and carved into it was a shape I didn't recognize. A ring, and inside the ring, a curled shape like an animal biting its own tail. A wolf, I thought, though it could have been a fox or a dog. Around the edge were little marks that looked almost like letters from an alphabet I'd never seen. "That's pretty," I said. "Where'd you get it?" Her hand shot up and covered it, fast, protective. "My father gave it to me," she said. "It means I belong to the pack." The pack. I remember the word sitting oddly in my ear, like a foreign coin, but kids say strange things. I figured the pack was a family word, a club, a game, the kind of private language families invent. Lord knows Theo called our little family the crew. I didn't think anything of it. I should have. That was the first real clue, right there in the bathwater, and I let it slide right past me. I made her toast and warm milk with honey because that's what my mother made me when I was small and scared, and Ivy ate 4 slices of toast like she hadn't eaten in a week. She held the honey milk in both hands and drank it slow, watching me over the rim of the mug the whole time. Not suspicious exactly, just watchful, aware, like a cat in a new house. "You're not scared of me," she said. It wasn't a question. "Should I be?" I said, trying to make it light. She thought about it, dead serious. "Most people are once they know." "Know what, honey?" She just smiled a little, secret and small, and drank her milk. I put her in Theo's bed. Theo was still at his grandmother's, wouldn't be back till the weekend, and she was asleep before I got the blanket up over her shoulders. I stood in the doorway for a long time just looking at her. This little stranger. This child who'd fallen out of the dark into my life. I told myself, first thing in the morning I call the police. She has a family somewhere, they're frantic. This isn't your child, Nora, don't get attached. Good advice, I didn't take it, not the way I should have. Because that night, something happened that I have never been able to explain. I woke up around 3 in the morning. I don't know why. I'm a hard sleeper, always have been, dead to the world the second my head hits the pillow. But that night I came awake all at once, complete, like someone had flipped a switch. And I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, not knowing why. And then I heard it. Breathing. Outside. Not human breathing. Big breathing. Slow, deep, heavy breathing right up against the wall of the house, right below my window. The kind of sound something large makes, something with big lungs. I lay perfectly still. The breathing moved, slow, along the wall, toward Theo's room, toward Ivy's room, and I heard the crunch of frost under something heavy. 1 step, 2, then a pause right outside her window. I got up. I don't know how I made my legs work, but I did. I crept down the hall in the dark and I stood outside Theo's door, and I could hear it out there, breathing, waiting, this enormous patient presence just on the other side of the glass. And through the crack in the curtains, in the thin light of the half-moon, I saw it. Eyes. 2 eyes, low to the ground but not low enough. They were nearly level with the windowsill, and the windowsill was 4 feet off the ground. Whatever it was big. And its eyes caught the moonlight and threw it back, gold and green, the way an animal's eyes do. It was looking into the room, looking at Ivy. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Every hair on my body was standing up. And then Ivy, without waking, without opening her eyes, rolled over in the bed and murmured one word, soft and sleepy and completely unafraid. "Daddy." And the eyes at the window blinked, slow, once. And then they were gone. I heard it move off, not running, walking, unhurried, back along the wall, across the frozen yard and into the tree line where the sound of it faded into the general dark of the woods. I stood in that hallway until the sun came up. I did not sleep again. Morning made it easier to pretend. That's a thing about fear, isn't it? In the daylight it shrinks, By the time the sky went gray and then pink over the mountains, I'd half convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. A bear, maybe. We got bears up here. A bear come down out of the forest, curious about the smell of a strange child. That was it. That was all. Bears breathe heavy. Bears have gold eyes. Bears don't stand 4 feet tall at the shoulder and look through a window like they're checking on someone. But I told myself bear, and I made coffee, and I made pancakes. And when Ivy padded into the kitchen dragging Theo's too big t-shirt behind her, rubbing her eyes, I smiled at her like nothing in the world was wrong. Morning, sleepyhead. She climbed up onto a kitchen chair and looked at the pancakes with enormous eyes. For me. All for you. Well, we'll split them. She ate 5. I have never in my life seen a child that small eat so much. And the whole time she watched me cook, watched me move around the kitchen, watched me the way you'd watch something you were trying to memorize. Ivy, I said, sitting down across from her with my coffee, I have to ask you some things, okay? Grown-up things, and I need you to tell me the truth. She went still, syrup on her chin, waiting. Where do you live? Your real home? Do you know the town, the road? In the mountains, she said, far up, past where the trucks go. Do you know your address, your phone number, anything I could use to find your family? She shook her head slowly. We don't have those, we don't like to be found. I set my coffee down. Honey, your family, they must be so worried about you. Your daddy, and I watched her face when I said it, watched for the flinch of a scared kid, and it didn't come. Her face just opened, soft, loving. Your daddy must be looking everywhere for you. He is, she said simply. He's close now, he came last night. The coffee went cold in my hands. What do you mean he came last night? To check I was safe. He couldn't come inside. She frowned like this was a rule that annoyed her. He's not allowed to come inside unless you ask him. That's how it works. He has to be asked. The eyes at the window, the breathing, daddy. I want to tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. Something cold walked down my spine and sat in my stomach. I remember gripping the edge of the table. Ivy, I said carefully, what was outside my house last night? And she looked up at me with those steady gold-brown eyes, so much older than her little face. And she said, gentle, like she was breaking hard news to me kindly. You already know, you just don't want to. I called the police that morning. Of course I did. Strange breathing and stranger children or not, there was a little girl in my kitchen who wasn't mine, and that meant a report, a search, a whole machine that had to start turning. The deputy who came out was named Cal Brody. I knew him a little. His wife came into the diner on Sundays. He was a decent man, slow-moving, careful, the kind who wrote everything down twice. He sat at my kitchen table and drank my coffee and looked at Ivy with kind eyes and asked her all the questions I'd asked and got all the same nothing answers. Then he took me out onto the porch, away from her, and lowered his voice. Nora, I gotta be straight with you. We got no missing kid reports. Not from here, not from the county, not from the state. I ran it before I drove out. Nothing. No Amber Alert, no runaway, nothing matching a girl her age anywhere in 300 miles. That's not possible, I said. Somebody lost her. She was in the river, Cal. I believe you. He rubbed the back of his neck. But there's no paper on her. It's like she came out of nowhere. He looked out at the tree line and something crossed his face, some flicker of unease I didn't understand yet. You said you found her up on the river road, past the iron bridge. Yes. That's a bad stretch, he said it slow. We've had folks go missing up that way over the years, hunters mostly, hikers, people who went into the high forest and didn't come back. He caught himself like he'd said more than he meant to. Anyway, point is we'll keep looking for who she belongs to. In the meantime, you okay to keep her a day or two? Social services is 2 counties over and stretched thin. She's warm here, she's fed. She seems to like you. I looked back through the window. Ivy was standing on a chair at the sink, helping wash the pancake pan, water everywhere, and she looked over her shoulder at me and smiled, and something in my chest just turned over. "Yeah," I said. "I can keep her." Cal nodded. He put on his hat, and as he went down the porch steps he paused and looked at the yard, and I watched him go very still. "Nora," he said quietly, "you have a dog." "No, why?" He pointed. There in the frost-hardened mud below Ivy's window was a print. One clear print, and it was a paw print, 4 toes and a big pad, the shape of a wolf's or a big dog's. Except it was the size of a dinner plate. Cal stared at it for a long moment. Then he did something I'll never forget. He stepped on it, deliberately, ground it out under his boot until it was just churned mud, and he said, not looking at me, "Wasn't anything there. Bears come down this time of year. You keep your doors locked." And Nora, he finally met my eyes and his face was pale. "If you're smart, when whoever comes for that girl comes for her, you let her go. Don't ask questions. Don't try to keep her. Some things up in that forest, they take care of their own, and they don't like folks getting in the middle." Then he got in his cruiser and drove away, and left me standing on my porch with a dinner plate paw print smeared under a stranger's boot, and a little girl singing to herself in my kitchen. The next few days were the strangest, and I'll admit it, some of the sweetest of my life. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about a moment like that. Even with the fear, even with the paw prints and the breathing in Cal Brody's pale face, a child is a child. And Ivy, for all her strange calm and her old eyes, was a little girl who had clearly not been held enough, not touched enough, not just loved on in the ordinary daily way. She followed me everywhere, into the kitchen, into the yard, into the bathroom if I let her. She wanted to be near me every second. When I sat down, she climbed into my lap without asking. When I read to her at night, she pressed her whole body against my side like she was trying to get inside my ribs. And she asked me things, 100 things a day about the world, ordinary things like she'd never seen them. "What's that?" "That's a television, honey." "What does it do?" She'd never seen a television. She'd never seen a microwave. She stared at cars going down the road like they were dragons. When I turned on a lamp, she gasped every single time, delighted, like light coming out of a switch was the finest magic she'd ever seen. "You didn't have lamps where you lived?" I asked. "We had fire," she said, "and the moon. My father says the moon is enough for us." "My father says," everything came back to him, "my father says the moon is enough. My father says you have to be strong. My father says the pack protects its own." She spoke about him constantly, this absent father, with a love so total and so unafraid that I finally, slowly, had to let go of my abused child theory. Whatever Ivy had run from, it wasn't him. "Ivy," I asked her one night, brushing out her hair, which was thick and dark and grew impossibly fast. I swear it was longer than when I'd found her. "If you love your daddy so much, why did you run away from home?" She was quiet a long time. "Because of the other pack," she said finally. "The gray ones, they wanted to take me, to hurt my father through me. My father would have started a war to keep me. Lots of people would have died." Her little jaw set, and for a moment she looked so much like an adult that it frightened me. "So I ran, where they couldn't follow, down the mountain past the iron bridge into the human places. They can't come here. There are too many people, too many eyes. It's not safe for them." "For who?" "For any of us." She turned and looked up at me. "That's why I came to you, Nora. The human world is the one place we're not allowed to be, so it's the one place I'd be safe." Her eyes shone. "And you found me out of everybody. You stopped your car. You climbed down to the water. You weren't afraid." She reached up and touched my face again the way she had that first night on the road. "You're the one who was supposed to find me. I felt it before you even came around the bend. I felt you coming." I didn't know what to say to that. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I pulled her into my lap and held her, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, warm as a little furnace, and we sat like that in the lamplight while outside the woods breathed and waited. I didn't know it yet, but we were both being watched every night. and the one watching was learning something he had not expected to learn. He was learning to trust me. Theo came home that weekend. I'd been dreading it, honestly. I didn't know how my 5-year-old was going to take a strange girl living in his room, eating his pancakes, being fussed over by his mama. Theo could be a jealous little thing. He was mine and he liked being mine, all of me, all the time. But something happened the moment those two kids saw each other that I still don't fully understand. Theo came through the door with his backpack and his gap-toothed grin, ready to launch himself at me, and he stopped, dead, in the doorway. And he looked at Ivy, who was standing by the wood stove watching him with those calm gold eyes. And Theo went very quiet. Then he walked up to her, slow, careful, the way you'd approach an animal you weren't sure about, and he looked up at her. She was a head taller, and he said, "You smell like the woods." And Ivy smiled, this slow, pleased, delighted smile, and she said, "You smell like her." And she pointed at me. "You're hers, that's good, that means you're mine too now." And that was it. That was the whole negotiation. From that second on, Theo followed Ivy around the way she followed me, worshipful, glued to her side, and she looked after him like a big sister who'd been born knowing how. She was gentle with him, patient. When he fell off the porch step and skinned his knee and started to wail, she got to him before I did, and she put her hand over the scrape and said something low I couldn't hear, and Theo stopped crying instantly, blinking. And when I looked at the knee the scrape was, I know how this sounds, it was already closing. Pink and clean, like it was 3 days old. "You're good with the little ones," I said to her carefully, kneeling down. "I'm going to be Luna someday," she said, matter of fact, like she'd said I'm going to be a nurse. "The Luna looks after everyone, that's the job. My father is the alpha, so I have to learn." She frowned at Theo's knee. "But I'm not supposed to do the healing thing where humans can see. That's a rule too." "There are a lot of rules," she sighed, this enormous world-weary 5-year-old sigh. "You're not going to tell, right?" "No," I heard myself say, "I'm not going to tell." And I meant it. God help me. Somewhere in those few days, without deciding to, I had crossed a line. I had stopped being a woman keeping a lost child until her family came. I had started being a woman who would lie for that child, who would stand between her and the whole world if she asked me to. I think that's the moment he decided to, the one in the woods. I think that's the night he came closer than he'd ever come. It was the 4th night. Theo and Ivy were both asleep, curled together in Theo's bed like two puppies, and I was on the porch. I couldn't sleep. I'd taken to sitting out there in the cold with a blanket and a mug of tea, watching the tree line, half terrified and I'm ashamed of this, half hoping. Because I knew now, I knew what was out there. I'd stopped telling myself bear. And some crazy part of me wanted to see it, him, whatever the word was. The porch light was off. I turned it off on purpose, and I sat in the dark with my tea going cold, and I watched the black wall of the forest, and I waited. He came out slow. At first it was just a deeper darkness at the edge of the trees, a shape resolving out of the shadows. Then it stepped into the moonlight, and I forgot how to breathe. It was a wolf. But calling it a wolf is like calling the ocean some water. It was enormous, bigger than any animal I'd ever seen, bigger than any animal that should exist, its shoulders higher than the porch rail, its head massive and noble and terrible. Its fur was dark, near black, silvered along the ridge of its back where the moonlight touched it. And its eyes, those same gold-green eyes from the window, found me in the dark and held me. I should have run. Every instinct in a human body says run from a thing like that. I didn't move. Because in those eyes there was no hunger, there was no rage. There was something I recognized, something I saw in my own eyes every night in the mirror. There was worry. There was a father's terror for his child. And there was something else aimed at me, something careful and confused and searching, like he was trying to figure me out the same way Ivy did, like he was reading me. We stayed like that for a long time, the wolf at the edge of the yard, the woman on the porch, the two sleeping children between us in the dark house. And then slowly, deliberately, the great wolf lowered its head, bowed it, to me, a gesture so human, so full of meaning that my eyes filled up with tears without my permission. Thank you, it seemed to say. Thank you for my daughter. Thank you for not being afraid. Thank you for being the one. I found my voice. It came out shaky. She's safe, I whispered into the dark. I've got her, I promise. She's safe with me. And the wolf, I swear this on everything I love, the wolf closed its eyes, just for a second, like a man letting go of a breath he'd been holding for a week, like relief, like a prayer answered. Then it lifted its head, gave me one last long look, turned and melted back into the trees. I sat on that porch till dawn again, but this time I wasn't afraid. This time I was just waiting for him to come back. He came back the next day. But not as a wolf. I was hanging wash on the line in the afternoon, Theo and Ivy playing some game with sticks in the yard when I heard an engine on the road. That was unusual by itself. Nobody came down Willow Bend but me. A truck. Old, dark, mud-splattered, the kind of thing that lives on logging roads. It slowed at my gate. And it stopped. Ivy went absolutely rigid. She was standing in the middle of the yard with her stick raised mid-game, and she went still all over, and her head turned toward the truck slowly, and her whole face changed. It broke open. All that careful, watchful calm just cracked and fell away, and underneath was pure, naked, 5-year-old hope. The truck door opened, and a man got out. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall in a way that made the truck look small, broad through the shoulders, dark-haired, maybe 40, dressed plain in a canvas coat and work boots. But he moved wrong. That's the only way I can put it. He moved too smoothly, too quietly, too aware, like every muscle in him was awake at once, like he was listening to 100 things I couldn't hear. He shut the truck door without looking at it. His eyes went straight to the yard. Straight to Ivy. And those eyes were gold green. The exact gold green of the wolf at the tree line. The exact gold brown of the little girl standing frozen in my yard. "Papa," Ivy breathed. And then she screamed it, "Papa!" And she dropped her stick and she ran, faster than any child should run, straight across the yard, and he was already moving, already down on one knee in the dirt with his arms open. And she hit him like a small missile, and he caught her and folded around her and made a sound I felt in my own chest. This low, broken sound of a father who had not been sure, right up until that second, whether he would ever hold his child again. I stood by the clothesline with a wet shirt in my hands, and I watched this enormous, dangerous, impossible man break down completely over a little girl. And I started crying too, because how could you not? He held her for a long, long time. He murmured into her hair in a language I didn't know, low and rough. She clung to his neck and laughed and cried at the same time. And Theo, bless him, stood off to the side, uncertain, until Ivy reached out one arm and pulled him into it too, and the big man opened his arm and gathered my son in like he was his own, gentle as anything. And then, over the heads of both children, the man looked up. At me. And the whole world went quiet. I don't have good words for it. I've tried for years to describe what happened when that man's eyes met mine, and I always come up short. It was like recognition, but I had never seen him before in my life. It was like coming home, but I was already home, standing in my own yard. It was like a door opening somewhere behind my ribs, a door I hadn't known was there, and cold, clean air rushing through it. My heart started pounding, not with fear, with something I hadn't felt since long before my husband left, something I'd honestly thought was broken in me for good. He felt it too. I saw it hit him. I saw those gold-green eyes go wide, saw him rock back slightly on his heel like he'd been pushed, saw his careful, controlled, dangerous stillness shatter into pure open shock. He stood up slow, with Ivy still wrapped around him, and he said, in a low, rough voice that seemed to come up out of the ground, "It's you." I didn't understand. I'm sorry, do we? You're the one who found her. It wasn't quite a question. His eyes moved over my face like he was memorizing it like Ivy did, and I understood suddenly where she'd learned it. You went down to the water in the dark, alone, a stranger's child. He shook his head slowly, wonderingly. You had no reason, and you weren't afraid of me last night on the porch. His voice dropped even lower. You looked right at me, and you weren't afraid. My mouth had gone dry. That was you, I whispered, at the tree line. That was me. And at the window. The first night. That was me. Something flickered across his face, shame almost. I couldn't come to you as a man, not yet. I had to know you were safe. I had to know she was safe. And I had to know. He stopped. Know what? He looked at me for a long moment. Ivy had gone quiet in his arms, watching us both with a small, knowing, entirely too pleased little smile. The smile of a child watching something go exactly the way she'd hoped. I'm sorry, the man said finally, and he seemed to gather himself to put the careful stillness back on like a coat. I'm being this isn't I owe you everything, and I'm frightening you. Forgive me. He set Ivy down gently and straightened to his full considerable height and put out one large, scarred hand. My name is Roan Ashford. I'm Ivy's father, and I have come a very long way, through a great deal of trouble, to find the woman who pulled my daughter out of a river. I looked at his hand. I looked at his face. I looked at Ivy, glowing, and Theo, curious, and the dark truck, and the black wall of forest behind it all where 4 nights ago a wolf, the size of a horse, had bowed its head to me in the moonlight. And I put my hand in his. The second we touched, something passed between us. A jolt. Warm, like Ivy was warm, like a current running from his skin into mine, and I heard him draw a sharp breath, and I knew he'd felt it too. His hand closed around mine, careful, like I was something that could break, and for a second neither of us let go. Nora, I said. My voice came out strange. My name is Nora. Nora, he repeated. And the way he said it, like he was learning it, like he was going to keep it, I felt it all the way down to my feet. Papa, Ivy piped up from below, delighted, tugging his coat. I told you she was the one. I felt her before she even came. Didn't I tell you? And Roan Ashford, Alpha, Wolf, father, the most dangerous and most heartbroken and most careful man I had ever met, looked down at his daughter, and then back up at me, and there was something in his face that scared me more than the wolf ever had. Because it was hope. Yes, he said quietly, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was the answer to a question he'd stopped letting himself ask. Yes, little wolf. You told me. Behind us, up in the high dark forest, something else was watching too, something with gray fur and pale eyes and a long memory. I didn't know it yet, but the gray ones had followed her scent down the mountain after all. They'd been patient. They'd been waiting to see who she ran to. Now they knew. And a war I didn't understand, in a world I hadn't known existed, was about to come looking for a single mom, 2 little kids, and a rented house at the end of Willow Bend. But that's the next part of the story.